Hey, we're here with Ultradavid, famous commentator, along with James Chen, for Street Fighter V and just fighting games in general. So you were up for best commentator or commentary team?
Best esports caster duo.
Best esports caster. You're officious now. You're very official. Okay, so you and I have talked multiple times over the years about, grassroots versus, kind of a bigger kind of like entity, well, what esports is becoming. It's clearly becoming bigger. It's clearly becoming more in front of people in general. Do you still like how do you feel that has affected the game? There's definitely more money going in, and there's definitely more opportunities for players. We talked about brands a long time ago, like in 2011. How do you think that's kind of shaped how, especially fighting game community and just the gaming community in general?
Well, I think that, so I can best speak to the fighting game community. The rest of the esports is a little bit separate from some of what we do. In the FGC, I feel like we have done a reasonable job of both growing and simultaneously taking in other parts of things that maybe we didn't have before, a little bit better production, some other sponsors, other advertisers, trying to broaden things in that respect, but without... At least our goal certainly is to do that without giving up sort of the essentials of the grassroots scene. That is not always easy to do. Sometimes there's a temptation to give up more of that in favor of getting maybe some more money or some more, whatever it is, more exposure. But I think that we've done an okay job, at least, of keeping that in mind and not giving up too much of that. So I still feel pretty confident that when I go to a fighting game tournament, it still usually feels like one. And that's super important to me. It always has been. I've been doing this since 17 years now. So I would hate for it to be so different. It's something I love how it always has been. That said, I want it to grow. I want there to be more chances for players and teams and producers and streamers and whatever to make a living out of it. So that has to come with some changes in how we do some things. So I'm okay with giving up a little bit of it, but the essentials we always have to keep. I really, and not just because that's sort of important to me subjectively, but also because I think that those things are part of what make us important and marketable even.
Right.
So we have to keep those things. When I watch other esports, I think that they are coming at it from a different kind of view. In some cases, it's not with a community-first idea. It's more that the community is being created by the developer or by the publisher. So it's a very different dynamic. But even in those...
Grassroots versus a more publisher-driven game.
Definitely, yeah. So in those cases, I think it's you can expect something different. And the people in those scenes maybe don't expect the kind of things that we in the FGC do expect because we have all this momentum behind us and how we have been doing things. So as long as everybody in their respective scenes is enjoying themselves, they think that their scene is still doing well, they think that their scene is still living up to whatever is important to them about it, then I'm happy. And that's going to be something different for the different scenes. We all come from a different time and place, and I think that it's super important to maintain those things about each particular scene. Those are going to be different among the different scenes.
Keep the spirit alive. So iBUYPOWER sponsored a collegiate esports award here today. More and more colleges and more institutions are recognizing, competitive gaming as a major part of. UC Irvine, we know people who've been affected by this, very much so. So my question to you is, what do you think are resources that you think younger players or players who are getting into these things really need in order to thrive in kind of this new world that's coming, where they are going to be like NCAA athletes, or I don't want to use that example, but like Division I NFL stars and stuff like that. What do you think are some resources you would want that aren't already offered to college players of Counter-Strike or Street Fighter or Overwatch or any of these gaming things that would help propel them, towards a career, not just to getting better, but towards a career in something like this?
I got to tell you, I think the number one thing is mindset. It's rather than maybe any individual physical good, new computer, a new mouse, whatever it is. It's to have a better grounding in the history and the future of competitive gaming and esports. So it's much more, I think, on the mentality side. When in a previous life, I was a major sports fan. Now that's video games have basically taken over, but in a previous life, that's true. And it was often the case, from what I've read and people who I knew in college, that they didn't quite have those lessons in terms of how to deal with the fact that they were, a famous running back who went to the NFL or whatever it was. There wasn't enough maybe institutional memory or sort of ideas about what it means to be an athlete and ways to move forward out of that to really help them in their future careers. So I really think that that's the most important thing is to have mentors to talk with and ideas about what you're going to do in your future, how you're going to do it. We all have been young and we know how that feels, and you don't necessarily think about how things are going to go in the future.
Right.
That becomes super important to future you, and past you is whatever about it. So that it's, I think, really important to try to make that young person understand what the potential of the future is, how to approach it. That's very tough. I don't want to make it seem like that's easy. Lots of people have to have their own sort of path through things.
Right.
But if you give them the resources, it's easier to do than if you don't. So I'd much rather give people those, mental, historical kind of resources than anything that's physical. I really think that the sort of mentality, and that, really goes along with education. Yeah. That's a big part of education in general, higher education, and that's something that I think that we should be doing when it comes to competitive gamers too.
You are, people will know this who know you, but you are an insanely prolific person. You're a lawyer, right? You've been on television already, 2 amazing things. The amount of stuff as a commentator though, in terms of all of those other things in your life, and with everything just pushing up, you're nominated for an award, you're in CBS, an award. How is this whole section in gaming and this community and everything else kind of impacted your life, looking back on it, like the things that you've learned from it and the things that you've put into other places, how much is this, of course, a significant deal, but in what ways,
it's been right at the forefront of my life the entire time. Since my dad brought back our first Commodore 64 when I was 3 years old, gaming has been a major part of my life, and very often in a positive context. So many of my best memories as a kid were playing video games with my dad or with my 2 brothers or with our cousins, and those are things that I'll always cherish. When it came to a little later, when I was in college, was when I really began taking competitive gaming seriously, and the development of the sort of competitive side of things in my mind was always very close to the development of the critical thinking side of things, whether it was in political science in undergrad or law school later. The development was very closely linked. I often felt that by, for example, studying a lot of law and the consequences and the critical thinking that came with it, that I became a better fighting game player. And in becoming a better fighting game player, I felt that I could better think on my feet in situations in law that were very important. So it's always really been so close, gaming and the career and life.
I don't want to interrupt you, but do you feel like your life would have changed, like your life would be very different if you had a program when you were growing up in college to do competitive gaming, or do you think it would kind of shaped out the same? You made your own. How do you think that would have affected your life?
I'll tell you, in college, I did have a competitive gaming class. I did. At Berkeley, students have a chance to teach. It wasn't Serlin.
Okay.
Oh, boy, the guy's name I can't remember offhand. But anybody can teach at Berkeley if you have a professor agree to it. So we had a fighting game class We had lessons. In fact, actually, now that I think about it, one of the readings was Serlin. Another one of the readings was Seth Killian. We had lab, which is to say we went to the arcade. So I did have that education. I was obviously very rare, very unique situation, especially in 2003. Nobody had that. But I did have that, and I found that it was key in coming to think about competitive gaming in a better way, and also in applying that to all the stuff I was talking about before, law and career and life. That was certainly super important. We read Sun Tzu. I mean, like, it was super cool. It was actually really useful, and I think that at the time was almost unique, right? But it would be great if there was more.
Perfect. David, you are a gentleman and literally a scholar. And I appreciate you, man. Ultradavid.
All my friends are laid up on the rent. I got money I still haven't spent. She get mad, but she know what I